So, hello and good evening to those joining from the US and Ohio gozaimasu to our attendees from Japan. My name is Paul Pass, and I am the Executive Director of the Japan America Society of Dallas-Fort Worth. Before we begin, I would like to express Japan America Society's support for the people of Tohoku following another earthquake earlier this month, as well as for the people of Texas, many who are still suffering from lingering effects of the winter storm. Of course, we also wish everyone safety and health during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Tonight's program is the second in our 311 Resilience series, which is generously supported by the Consulate General of Japan in Houston. We also would like to invite you to watch our first event of the series, a screening of the film Voices of the Wind, or Kaze no Denwa in Japanese, which is available through Sunday, February 28th. Our third program will take place on March 16th and focus on recovery in Tohoku since 2011. Looking back 10 years ago, the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami have a special place in our hearts in North Texas because Dallas and Sendai have been international friendship cities since 1997. We responded to the needs of our Japanese friends by raising over $185,000 for relief, and this was eventually donated for major repairs and improvements to the Mori no Sato nursing home in Sendai. Now I would like to briefly introduce our special guest and speaker for the evening, Seietsu Sato. He is a retired assistant fire chief from Kesennuma City in Miyagi Prefecture. He now devotes his time sharing his experiences during the earthquake and tsunami and how we all must value human life. Sato-san, yoroshiku onegaishimasu. Dozo hajimete kudasai.
Good evening to everyone in the United States. Hello to everyone in Japan. My name is Seietsu Sato. I was a firefighter in Kesennuma City in Miyagi Prefecture in the Tohoku region of Japan. Last week, I saw on Japanese TV news about the severe winter storms and snow in Texas and the damages caused, like bursting of water pipes. I would like to express my sympathy to all those who were affected by the disaster. I would like to thank the Japan America Society of Dallas-Fort Worth for giving me this opportunity to speak to you all at this online event between the US and Japan. Thank you very much. During the past 10 years since the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami, I was able to overcome days of hardships, thanks to the support and guidance from many people from both Japan and abroad. I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude and appreciation to all of these people. The great earthquake of once in 1,000 years turned Eastern Japan into a world of fear and deep sorrow. I hate the Great East Japan earthquake that swept away my loved one, beloved family and colleagues, and houses full of memories, just like leaves. But I also learned the importance of fully accepting this truth and to take strong steps toward new goals and objectives with a positive mindset and heart. For the next 45 minutes, I will talk about the truth I experienced. I hope that my story can be of any help to you. Okay, I will begin. Please watch this video made by junior high school students, whom I met when I spoke at a lecture in a junior high school in Tokyo. I hope it serves as an introduction about myself.
愛する家族や同僚ら、大切な家々を木の葉のごとくさらっていった東日本大震災が私は憎い。
It is the opening lines of his speech.
Mr. Seietsu Sato is the Kataribe of the Great East Japan Earthquake. Kataribe is a Japanese storyteller of natural disaster. He has done this speech over 260 times. He lives in Kesennuma in Miyagi Prefecture. On 2011, March 11th, a 20-meter tsunami hit, which also caused huge fires in the house of Kesennuma. Mr. Sato was a leader of a rescue squad in Kesennuma fire station at that time.
2011年の3月11日なんですけれども、その日はちょうど私は非番で家にいたんですけれども、大きな地震が発生して、そしてあとは家から出てですね、消防署に駆けつけて、そして気仙沼の津波火災の大炎上火災の現場に向かいました。
He worked on extinguishing the fire all night until it was almost completely out. But when he went back to the fire station, he heard bad news.
火災現場から帰ってきて全体集合した時に同僚から A4 番の紙にね、行方不明者リストがダーッと載っていた。それに上から2番目に佐藤敦子っていう名前を見せられて、腰が抜けたっていうのはことだなとね思いました。女房を捜索活動に行って一人で探したんですけども、なかなか見つけることができなくて、そして消防という使命2文字、これで災害現場で活動することに決めた。
6 days later, Mr. Sato's wife, Mrs. Atsuko Sato's body was found. Mr. Sato had lost his beloved wife. 3 years later, he decided to be a Kataribe.
女房が亡くなってね、2年間は三回忌が来るまでは言わず語らず喋らずでずっと来た。しかしね、自分がおかしくなるっていうのが分かったんでね、語るということに3年経ってから決めた。
He still has a strong will that will never change.
この東日本大震災でね、約2万人の方が犠牲となりました。やはり亡くなった方々へのね、思いを忘れない、そしてあなたを忘れないということをずっと心の奥底にね置いて活動しています。やはり私もこれからも命ある限り伝え語り続けていきたいと思います。
This was the disaster response headquarters. The far left is myself. But usually, the field command chief does not stay inside the disaster response headquarters. The duty of the field command chief is to take the order from the headquarters and decide a course of action of the firefighters on site and carry out the disaster rescue operations. I judged that this disaster is something we had never seen in our lifetime, so I voluntarily went inside the headquarters, gathered the necessary information, and went back. During the whole time, I led the disaster rescue efforts with my firefighting team at the disaster centers. In the evening, the fire chief instructed me to go to the disaster site, so I went and saw this scene of fire in Kesennuma from the bridge. Immediately after assessing the site, I decided to establish a line to prevent further spread of fire. So I gathered the entire firefighting team on top of a large bridge and informed each and every one of the members the action plan for the formation of long-distance water supply operation.
延焼阻止線を設定するということで全部隊に話しました。 これが
So, where do we get the water from?
話して
Groundwater wouldn't work.
水流はどうか
Can't go to the
という
ocean.
ことで海には
Can't access the fire hydrants, nor the water
それ
tanks.
は消火栓もダメです貯水槽もダメですということ
So I
で
decided to draw water from all the way up from the water reservoir on the summit of Mount
こ
Amba.
れにつけて
And I informed the firefighting teams
活動
the
するという
decision.
ことで方針を皆さんに話しました。
So one officer
隊員
asked,
から指揮隊
Are
長
we really
本当に
going to get the
山からやるんですか
water from the mountain?
っていう話が
I told him, This is the only way.
これしかないということで
And
やることに決
since
定しました。
we were not enough
この
for
部隊
this
だけでは
operation,
足りない
I
ので
requested dispatch of additional firefighters from neighboring areas.
隣の
But the
町の
neighboring
唐桑町
town of Karakua,
出動要請をかけ
the team was
唐桑町
isolated.
は孤立して
And the
やることが
Takada
でき
team
ない
from Iwate Prefecture was also on the brink of a devastation.
隣の隣県ですけれども出動要請をかけた
Then
高田は
the coastal
壊滅状態
firefighting team from Motoyoshi
そ
district
れでは
was
隣
also
町の
affected,
元吉町の出動要請をかけ
and the team from the town of Minami Sanriku was also
た
devastated.
では南三陸町の出動要請をかけました。そしたら
All the coastal fire departments were destroyed, so I restricted dispatch of teams and reinforcements from the mountainside.
出動要請をかけてさらに後続隊の出動要請をかけました。そして
Soon the firefighters from the mountainside arrived.
近くの山手の消防
They
隊
said,
の方々
Command
駆け
Captain,
つけてきま
what
した。
should we do?
そして指揮隊長どうするんですかどうしますかっていう
So I told them, we will make a formation for a long distance water supply operation.
初隊は先ポンプと元ポンプをやる。皆さんは長ポンプで
I told the entire
中
squad
継
the plan of
臨床
action.
措置線を張りますのでよろしくお願いしますということで
Yes, sir.
活動方針を告げました。
From the strong words of my team members, I felt a sense of reliability.
高齢的な言葉でね話してくれたね言葉がまだ目に残っています。
From the water reservoir on top of the hill, 1,600 meters away, the water hose was extended along the railway tracks.
この
Beyond these tracks was Mount Amba, and soon after we would see the border with Iwate
岩手
Prefecture.
県の
So we feared that the fire might reach Iwate Prefecture as well.
していく
So immediately we started discharge of water
即ここで
and we started extinguishing the fire. I thought, yes.
その時はもうね放水
I think the other members also felt the same way.
よしとね思いましたね。私ばかりじゃないと思います。多くの隊員もそう思ったと思います。
When we were trying to extinguish the fire,
し始まった頃
there was an announcement that the tide was ebbing,
潮位の変化
which meant that tsunami was coming.
ということで潮位の変化という引き潮が始まったということは津波が来るということなんですがどれぐらい
Things were uncertain, but I thought that the tsunami was coming, so I instructed the whole team to withdraw and evacuate.
人命第一ということで全部隊を撤退命令をかけました。
I ordered evacuation,
なかなか
but they didn't come right away.
隊長
All my teams were in the midst of extinguishing the fire.
懸命だったんですが
I yelled at the team leaders, saying, "Evacuate now!"
各隊長に
using the radio first, but the radio didn't work anymore. So used the loudspeaker, but the battery ran out. So then used the portable microphone.
それで
But then soon after that battery died. So finally I used my own voice to scream, "Come and evacuate!"
そして肉声で今度は叫んでね
In the distance, I heard them say, "Yes, sir." But
分かってるんですよね。
they didn't come right away.
返事はねかすかに来て
Finally,
る。でもなかなか帰ってくる。
all my team members came to the top of the bridge.
すべて
And
撤収して全部隊
so we checked their safety.
あとすぐ天候を取って安全確認をしてそして
And then I told them, the next time I give an order, leave everything behind, the hose, nozzle, pump, car, and everything, but only you evacuate.
各隊長に話しました。そして
After checking the
確
situation
認をして、また
and that
消
there
火
was
態勢
no
に入る
tsunami
っていう
in
のを
danger
確認して、
that would put them in
全部
danger, the team went back into the fire to continue operations. But
次に
then
また
another
津波が
announcement came that there was a
ということで
tsunami
ま
coming.
た撤退の命令を
So
かけ
in that last
その時は
time,
ね
the team came back to
速やかに
safety
すぐ来ま
immediately.
したね。ということで、私全部隊がですね、
For over
とにかく
40 years as a firefighter,
安全に
I
必
was
ず
always
家
determined
族の
that
元に
all of us will
41
go back
年
safely
な
to
ろう
our
としていたのが
families.
その時消防生活
I
必
was
ず
so
あらゆる
determined.
災害活動の中で必ず全員
This
で
was
家族の
always
元
at
に
my
帰るん
heart.
だということをですね、
And there was a
心
reason
し
for
て
this.
活動しておりました。これには理由があります。ということで、
By the next morning, large
現在
flames had
後続隊で
disappeared.
すね、翌朝になりました。そうすると大きな炎がなくな
Unfortunately,
ります。
reinforcements
だから
arrived,
もう翌朝には後続隊が来
So
ましたのでね、それで
when the chief of the
後
reinforcement
続の隊長さんがね、大隊長さん
came
が
and asked who was in charge of this operation here,
この
I
最
said,
高責任
Yes,
者
sir,
の方は
it's
どな
me.
たですかってこうお話を
I was the only
はい
one
私で
left
す
on the
それで
bridge.
装備でね
All my team members were
大
in
橋
the
に
midst of the
私を
fire
処理しておりま
extinguishing.
す。全部隊が現場に入っており
Even
ます
10 years after,
それで今10年
when
に
I
なりますけれ
when
ど
I
も
think
今
about
思い
the
ますと
the time I said, Yes, sir, it's me, I still feel a chill in my spine.
背筋がこう寒くなる思いですね。ということで、
So
全部隊
all the
無線機
firefighting teams reported back to the station.
消防本部に
Then we were all called together on the
で消
second
防
floor.
本部に帰りまして、全部隊が着いたら消防庁曰く全員2階に上がれということで全員
According to the
2階に上が
fire
りました
chief,
その中で
there were many victims amongst the family members of the
家族に
firefighters.
かなりの犠牲者に
He ordered those who
帰れ
could
る
to go home.
ものは帰っていいということに
I wasn't going to return
そ
home,
れで私は帰る気がなかったそれで
but eventually he told me to go
そうした
back.
うちに指揮隊長も帰っていいですよという話に
But then at that moment,
その
I felt
言われ
an
た瞬間
uneasy sense of
なんか
foreboding.
悪い予感がしたんですけれども
When I tried to go
そ
home,
して帰ろうとして
I tried to go home quickly and go back to the front line again.
しました
But then an officer asked me,
指揮
Wait,
隊長ちょっと待
isn't
って
this your wife?
ある職員がですね A4
The
番の紙を
moment I was shown a piece of paper
見せられた
and read in the second line the name Sato Atsuko from Shunpo Nursing Home.
名前が
I was paralyzed
これは
with terror
奥さんじゃ
and
ないですか
and collapsed onto the sofa behind.
それをね聞いた時は
I had just returned from the disaster site and
腰が抜けたっていう
to see
のは
this
あのことだなと思い
I
ま
was
すね
paralyzed
そのままこう
and collapsed.
崩れてですねちょうどに後ろにソファーがありましたねそこに座って
I took a brief moment, about 3 minutes, to calm down
押し付けて
and headed back to the local fire
現場の
station.
方にもう地元の方にですね行きましたそして
And
現場わ
in
ずか
the
な
very
時間です
short
が
time
自分で
I had,
探
I
しました
searched for my wife
そして
and I found the car my wife was probably driving.
車を発見しましたそして
I had also gone to the
地元の
evacuation
避難所に行き
center,
ましたそしたら
and when I arrived, my family was there.
いましたそしたらお父さんおじいちゃんね
And they came to me
お母さん
crying
おば
that
あちゃんが
grandma hadn't returned.
泣きながらこう
So I told them, don't cry, don't make any noise.
騒ぐな
Kesennuma is facing an emergency,
私たちばかり
and there are so many others who are also in the same situation. So don't cry, don't make noise.
と言わせたのが
It was my uniform that made me say these words. my uniform of a firefighter. If I had worn regular clothes, I would have probably cried with my family. So, when I left the evacuation center, my friends gave me 2 precious rice bowls. I tried to reject, but he insisted so many times, so I thanked him and took them. And so, in front of the car that my wife was probably driving, I ate the rice bowls and shared them with her. And I told her, I'm so sorry, but I'm going back to the disaster site. So in the limited time, I searched for her, and I said sorry, and I said my goodbye to her and returned to the front line. I decided to keep my thoughts about my wife to myself and fulfill my mission as a firefighter and fight to protect people's lives. The next morning around 8:30, there was a man stuck inside this car, and he was brought to safety. As the night fell, I could somehow hear faint voices from the darkness calling, "Help!" And we rescued a woman. There was water up to our hips, and we continued operations in this environment. This is a photo from my last day in Kesennuma when we searched for survivals and conducted rescue operations. This is the only photo I was able to take. I couldn't take pictures. This is the main railway tracks of Kesennuma. And that's where we searched for survivors. When I dug up the debris around a poking finger, there was only one arm. I found only the upper half of the body and sometimes only the lower half of the body. We identified the victims by looking at their nameplates on their hips. So I was always looking at the ground and my back hurt, so I looked up and I found a woman's body on top of a tree. From the waves of the tsunami, with all the knives and glasses debris, they all ripped and cut away her clothing, so she was completely naked, and her body was completely burned by the fire. And when I rescued her body on top of a tree, that was the last operation in Kesennuma. On April 1st, I received an order to assume the position of Deputy Chief of the Minami Sanriku Fire Department, so I headed to the town of Minami Sanriku. This was the destroyed building of the Minami Sanriku's disaster response headquarters. This was the only picture I took right after I arrived. This photo was taken from the disaster prevention building. We can see the massive tsunami hitting the building, and the official who survived the tsunami from the rooftop gave me this photo. The next morning, one firefighter was evacuating the residents alone at his own initiative. The people in the community kindly gave me this photo because they knew that I was giving talks about the experience. This was the Minami Sanriku Fire Department, which was destroyed. I was sitting here until the year before. But I was transferred to the Kesennuma Fire Department. And then the disaster struck. This was the joint memorial service of the 10 firefighters of Kesennuma we lost I would like to express my sincerest condolences to these 10 firefighters. Please join me in a moment of silence for 10 seconds. Please pray. Thank you very much.
これは南三陸消防署が津波で被災しています。
The fire department of Minami Sanrik was completely destroyed.
みんなでテントを
So we set up a tent.
そしてテントを組み立てました。ここにあるのは山から土を
You can see these sandbags we used to hold down the tent from being blown away by the wind. These are precious food and meals provided from the evacuation center. The tent was used for meetings, holding space, dining room, and storage space. In the limited time we had, we spent some time for peace and quiet. In this limited time, we ate, and then after that we would go back to the front line again. On July 1st, we held the opening ceremony of the Minami Sanriku Fire Department's temporary office, the trailer house. This is the mayor of Minami Sanriku, Seietsu Sato. He came to give a speech and read the order. I will never forget the opening ceremony at 8:25 in the morning. Originally, we were supposed to set up our office in this container house, but delivery was delayed. So during that time, all the officials asked me, what can we do about it? But then, fortunately, we were able to receive this wonderful trailer house instead and set up our office. The container house came later on. The one operating this large crane truck was me. Even when I was the deputy chief, I had to do whatever I could at that time. Since I was educated and trained as a member of a rescue team, I have the license and qualifications to operate large vehicles, small cranes, and slinging work. But it's not enough to just have the license and qualifications. You have to be able to do the actual work. So I did everything I could. In the fall, it became very cold. So around November, we used our own precious blankets to cover the front glass of the fire engines and prevent the freezing of the front glass. Next, we wanted a garage, so we built it ourselves. We also built a terrace. In the days before Christmas, we held various fire and disaster prevention classes at the temporary housing units organized by the government and the private sector. We also served roasted sweet potatoes, but no one ate them. Why? For these people who lost their family members and houses, they couldn't eat delicious food like this because they said they felt sorry for those who died. They said they couldn't eat the sweet potatoes by themselves, so they took them and disappeared into the temporary housing units. Firefighters suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. During the morning meetings, they complained of headaches, their shoulders were tense, their backs were hurting, and their legs were hurting. During operations, they started laughing. Some continued to cry, silently looking down. Some of them yelled out loud, "Wow!" So we asked counselors to come to the town of Minami Sanriku and asked for counseling service for the officers. So counselors came from all over the country. It was supposed to be 30 minutes per person, but it didn't end. It lasted until 2 hours per person. And when the firefighters finished, they said, "I feel so relieved." The counselor cried with me. They started telling me what they discussed with the counselors, even those who usually don't speak to me. The counselors came very early in the morning and stayed until late at night and returned to Tokyo. I thought I would stay in Minami Sanriku for another year until I retired. But I received an appointment as Communication Command Section Chief in the headquarters. My duties included overseeing the fire department's radio's digitalization and the renovation of command center. I dedicated my last year to this work. During that time, I was fortunate to receive so much support and cooperation by many people around me. At the farewell ceremony, I said, "Today is my last retirement day as a firefighter. Thank you for the past 40 years. That was the only word I said, because everybody knew me. As I drove off by the car, I saw on the rear view mirror members of my team seeing me off from the corner of the trailer house. And I cried. I get choked up when I think about that moment. I was so grateful. This was my last salute after 40 years as a firefighter. So about leaders in disastrous situations. When disaster strikes, leaders will always show up. Always. But what's important in a leader? Leaders should not waver. Don't waver from what? Leaders should have an unwavering determination to protect lives. First, protecting their own lives, then lives of family members and organizations and the community. Also, please be someone who can adapt to changing circumstances. Don't be complacent. Adapt to the changing environment and think of the next steps. I learned the importance of these things at the Great East Japan earthquake. One year after the earthquake, in April 2012, Minami Sanriku received a group from Baylor University in Texas, United States, who came to assist us. This was the first time I met with the group. This is Yuko Sensei, who teaches at Baylor University. Also, here are Mikey-san, Alexander,
長谷川健二さん、
Takashi-san,
そして大山さん、そして
Hasegawa Kenji-san,
本屋さん、
Oyama-san,
リンダさんですね。この方々が
Honya-san, and Rinda-san.
これが長年10年間今日までですね
At that time,
続くことは
no one knew that my meeting with these people would lead to the development of wonderful local exchange programs for recovery and
こ
reconstruction.
の方々は何をしたかというと海岸の
Next year,
ゴミ拾い活動
these people assisted us in picking up trash from the beach.
地元の学
Furthermore,
校で交流活動をしたいということでですね私の出身の
My alma mater, Tsuya Elementary School in Kesennuma City, which was affected by the earthquake and tsunami, started participating in exchange programs with Baylor University that included storytelling, dance, magic shows, singing, and piano performance.
本当に素晴らしい活動をしていただきました。私、消防士です
This
けれ
was
ども
wonderful.
ずっとですね、非番週休でスポーツボランティア活動を
In my
50年
free
間
time,
やってきました。その中で
I
25
volunteered
年になりますけれど
to
も
coach sports teams for over 50 years. And then I was also a volunteer to coach a local volleyball team at a local school in Motoyoshi Town for 25 years. So we held a volleyball program with Baylor universities. And everybody's smiling with their teeth. This is my grandson. After the earthquake, it took me 2 years for me to smile and laugh showing my teeth. I couldn't do this at the time of the disaster. So I was very thankful. So what is the most important thing about meeting with these people through these wonderful programs? That's compassion. What is compassion? What's important in meeting people? Well, compassion is, for example, when a grandma tries to climb up the stairs, it's not enough to just worry about her and what might happen to her. But having compassion is to actually hold her hand and help her up the stairs. I learned that having compassion is to put your thoughts into action.
これがですね、子どもたちとのスポーツ活動、一緒に交流活動をやって、そして
On the way back from the youth sports event in the car, Yuko sensei asked me
来てくれませんか。
to talk about the earthquake and tsunami.
そんで、私被災地で妻のことを語るということをしたこと
Until
はない。
then,
言わず語らずしゃべ
I
る
had never spoken about my wife.
話をさせていただいたということで、
But that evening,
初めて
I spoke about
妻のことをですね、
losing my wife and my experience
この
for the
当時の
first
ことは
time.
一つも覚えてません、私。涙でね、何を
I
話し
still don't remember what I talked about because I was crying and I was overwhelmed by emotions.
話を聞く、人の話を聞く姿、
But I was deeply
これに
moved
私
by
感
the
動しま
way
した
the students from Baylor University listened to my story.
思いました。
I felt so
こ
grateful.
れらの話がもう2014年には動画で
In 2014,
世界に
we presented a video about our exchange programs with Baylor University.
私
You may already
農
know
家の
about
ですね
this.
5代目長男として生まれました。
I was born a fifth generation farmer and the eldest son
ここが私の
who became a firefighter.
あります。すべて
I had rice fields here,
この状況
but the
を見た
massive
瞬間
tsunami
に
completely destroyed my rice fields. But after seeing the destruction, I promised myself that I will
そ
restore
れ
it.
で 時間を見つけてですね、私一人で瓦
So
礫
first,
ですね、さらに
in the time I
ナイ
had,
フ、ガラ
I
スの破
started
片、
removing
それ
debris
からフォーク、
by myself.
包丁などをですね、
Debris
取
like
り除いたんですが、
knives, cups,
幼い
pieces
家
of
族が
glass,
ですね、
stones,
小
and
学校
forks
1年生、小
from
学校
the
6
rice
年生
field.
して、
But then,
ママ、
soon
パパです
after,
ね、
my young
私一人で
family
やってるんです
of
が、
my
後から来
first
て
and
ですね、
fourth grade
手伝ってく
grandchildren,
れるんですよ。
my son and
私
my
はね、
daughter-in-law,
嬉しかった
they
です
came
ね。
and helped me
そ
out.
してここで
I was
火
so
にかけた
happy.
全部すべて拾最後はですね、網をかけて、通
So
し
we
をかけて、
collected all
そし
the
てきれいな
the debris
しました。
and then we filtered the soil and made it
水を
clean in
入れ
the
て
end.
ですね、田んぼを
And after the
耕します。
field became
あの
greener,
娘がね、おばあ
we
ちゃんが
put
いなくなって、
water into the
おばあ
field.
ちゃんの生きている
And
時の
here is
姿
my
をですね、
granddaughter
表してこう、
who
あれ
was
がそうなんですね。
imitating her
本当に
grandma as she was no longer with us. So
嬉しかったですね。
it was so touching to see her like that.
秋になりました。稲刈りという時に、国ね、内外
In the
各
fall,
国の方々が
in the season
手伝い
of
に来ますよ
harvesting the
ということに
rice,
なりました。
people
そ
from
の時に
both
ですね、
home and
アメリカ
abroad
在
came
住
to
の
assist us.
後藤彩さんという方
Among these people
が
were
さらに
Ms.
ヨランダ
Ayagoto from
そ
the
して
US
本間真理子さん
and
という
also
方々
Ms.
で
Yolanda
岩本
Tashiko,
博監督ですね。バレーボール
Ms. Mariko
監
Honma,
督です。この方々
and
が
Mr. Hiroshi Iwamoto,
こと
a
方
volleyball
々
coach.
のつながり
These
が
people became key figures who would visit the affected areas every year to continue these exchange programs.
そして2014年の4月の11日月命日です。この時に
On April 11th,
ハワイに行くと
2014, on the monthly anniversary of my wife's death, I visited Hawaii. I had promised my wife to take her to Hawaii, but for a long time I was wondering how I could go there, but I was finally able to go.
それから山に登りたいっていう話を
She wanted to see the ocean and the mountains.
行ってね、朝6時頃ですよ。
I remember that.
そんで
So I visited the Waikiki
そ
beach.
して何枚もね、写真
It was around 6 a.m.,
あの
but I set up a tripod stand and took many pictures of myself at the beach.
に登りました。そして
And then I also went to the Diamond Head.
あの中国の方なんですけれどもね。でこう私を撮って
When I asked the Chinese tourist to take a photo of me,
それで
the tourist
涙
understood
を流しながら
that I was holding the portrait of my late wife,
その姿を見てね、
and the
私
tourist also cried while taking the photo for me. So I also cried by looking at the tourist.
っていうね、思いで本当に
I was so grateful that I could share my feelings with a stranger in another country.
稲刈り、おいしいお米、震災で復活したおいしいお米をね、いただく
I
だけでは
couldn't
申し訳
enjoy
ない
the delicious new rice by myself,
田植えカップもしよう。
so
田植えもやろうと
together with these people,
全国から
we decided to host the rice planting cup.
そしてこうやってみ
And
んなで活動して
We
いく
had participants from all over the country and the world.
そして一般家庭の中に入ってほしいなと思いまして、あの当時はなかなか
I wanted our friends and volunteers to visit our homes.
残りましたので、200メーターぐらい
Fortunately,
手前までは
my house was saved from the disaster,
残りましたので、ぜひということで、私
So-
の家にベーラ大学の皆
so
さんが
I invited
立ち寄って、
the Baylor University students to my house.
厳格な方でね、家に
At first,
なかなか
my mother was
全部外です。
very strict
ですから
and
ベーラ大学
didn't
の
let
皆さんと
strangers
外で
into her
お
house.
話をしています  最
So we met
初
outside.
当時は話もしないでこうやっていたんですよね。下を向いていたんですけれども。
At the beginning, she wouldn't even talk and she just looked at the ground. But
初めてです、
in the end,
この当時は90歳。
she was laughing with her mouth open. I hadn't seen my mother laughing this much. She was 90 years old back then, and now she's 95. This program, Leaning on Each Other, enables people to lean on each other and hear the heartbeat of life.
2019年ですね。ベーラ大学
This is
が
in 2019.
95歳の母が家の中に入れました。ベイラー大学の皆さん。
Students from Baylor University
語り部ですね。
visited my mother and she let them into her house.
その当時の震災の
The 90-year-old mother
それを
told the story about her experience at the Great East Japan earthquake. I was so deeply moved by the serious way the students were listening to her.
そして最後にですね、家を帰るときに
And
バスの
then,
中から
when it was time for the students to leave,
孫たちが手を振ってベイラー大学
these are my grandchildren waving at the students,
そして
and these are the students waving at them from the bus.
人と人との触れ合い、これがいかに人が人を助けるか。
I learned the importance of these programs that connects people's hearts with hearts. People can help other people.
そして
I'm so grateful.
アメリカに来て話してくれということで、アメリカにフライトしました。
I was invited to speak in the United
ベイ
States,
ラー大学
so I flew there.
でウッドランズハイスクール
In April
ヒュー
2016,
ストン日米
I gave a talk about my experience at Baylor University, Woodlands High School, and with the Japan American Society of Houston in Herman Park. These are students from Baylor University and Yuko sensei. And here in the back,
が
here are
ウッドランズ
Hasegawa Rinda-san and
夏美
Kenji-san.
先生がこの日にいらっしゃい
And over here, this is a Woodlands High School, and Masumi sensei is in the audience.
今日のこの
They all welcomed me warmly. I'm so
さ
grateful.
せていただく
So, how I was able to have this opportunity to speak to you all today?
アメリカにですね、
Last month, on January 18th, I gave a talk in an online event co-organized by the Japanese Teachers Association of Texas and Baylor University.
風化させないためにっていうので、オンライン講演をさせていただいたのがご縁で、
This online event was what led to this opportunity today to meet all of you from Dallas today and speak to you at this online meeting.
あります。本当にありがたいなと思います。
Thank you very much.
東日本大震災、大津波最高高、遡上高ですね。気仙
The
沼市の
maximum run-up height of the tsunami from the Great East Japan earthquake was 20.9 meters at the Koizumi Beach in Kesennuma City's Motoyoshi town. This is a video footage that I actually took when I boarded the helicopter. This helicopter was used in rescue operations during the earthquake and the tsunami.
上空から映像を撮りました。これが妻と一緒に結婚した時のホテル。
This was the hotel
もうなくなって
where my wife and I had our
これが
wedding,
妻が働
the
いていた
Seaside Palace
老
Hotel.
人ホームです。
This was the nursing home where my wife worked,
この映像は
and this was where her body was found.
どうしてかというと、こう全部すべて防潮堤
I
なんです
can no longer see this view
東日本で
because
最も
a seawall has been constructed here.
防潮堤と
It's the biggest seawall in the eastern part of Japan,
防潮堤ですね。ということで、
the biggest seawall in Miyagi Prefecture.
貴重な映像となりました。
So this footage became a very precious footage for me.
奥さんが見つかったぞって所長からね、話されました。
Command Chief, we found your wife, the fire chief told me.
ですね、向かいました。
My wife's body was held in a high school
と
gym,
ころが一番最初に入ったんですが、なかなか入っていけない。
but I didn't want to enter the
生き
gym.
ているね、敦子に会うんであれば、
I would have liked to see my wife alive.
死んだね、妻に会うのが嫌でしたね。
I didn't want to see my dead wife.
近くまで行ってね、ビニール袋に
It was agonizing to take every step toward
全
Atsuko.
て裸です。
As soon as I saw her naked body wrapped around in a plastic bag,
そして
I checked that it was her and I hugged her. and said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't save you." And I said, "I'm going to come to you, so wait for me." But then my son was standing behind me. So later on, he whispered to me he couldn't have bared to lose Dad as well. And when I heard that, I came to my senses. I thought that I'm not the only one in deep sadness. So many people lost their loved ones. 20,000 people died in this disaster, and everyone suffered from their loss. So I never spoke about my wife again. So I said, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." So I took off my uniform jacket and covered her and sent her off to heaven. I'm someone who was educated and trained to save people's lives. At the ranger team and the rescue squad of the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force. I was also trained as a rescue specialist at the Miyagi Fire Prevention Academy. And I've been serving the community. But I couldn't save my most loved one. There is nothing more painful than this. So I vowed to live my life with self-reproach for the rest of my life. I vowed to do this in the midst of the disaster 10 years ago. When I was cleaning the Buddhist altar at home, I found a letter that my 4th grade granddaughter wrote to her grandma, smiling happily in heaven. When I was reading the letters, my grandchild came to me and said, "Grandpa, I want to see Grandma even just once more." But I couldn't think of anything to say to her. At school lectures, I tell kids that when people die, you can never see them again. You can never see your beloved once again. But I couldn't say this to my granddaughter. I couldn't say it to her. I couldn't even hug her. I learned that there is the truth in words you can't say to your loved ones. I learned so many things from the disaster. On the day of the respect for the aged, my grandchild wrote this big thank you for me at school. But Grandma's name was missing, so she later added Grandma in front of me. She knew that we were very close. And such a big thank you for me. I'm so moved. On my retirement day, my grandchildren gave me the certificate of appreciation. They welcomed me at the front entrance of the house and read it aloud and presented me this certificate. This was by far the best certificate of appreciation I ever received. The day before the great earthquake, on March 10th, Atsuko brought the elderly local residents to the Kesennuma Fire Department's Disaster Prevention Center for a visit and to learn about the disaster response. When the group finished their visit, I greeted the group. When I was about to leave the room, one lady said, That's Atsuko-san's husband. So I went back into the room and said, "Thank you for supporting Atsuko." Then the whole group said, "No, we are the ones being supported by Atsuko-san every day." So when I heard that, I thought Atsuko was doing a great job at work. Before leaving, my wife came to greet me and said, "Thank you very much for today." Then she drove the car and left. That was the last time. I never imagined it to be the very last time I saw my wife. In conclusion, I would like to talk about one of the 10 lessons learned. First, protect your own life. In the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami, even if you're a couple, siblings, parent and child, or friends, even when they all held their hands together, they got separated right in front of their eyes and left separately. Then there is a word self-help. But there is a kanji hidden between self and help. What do you think it is? Yes, it's the kanji life. The kanji life is hidden between self and help. So protect your own life. If another earthquake strikes, make sure you protect your life first. Then, once you are safe, help those around you. This is going to be the beginning of cooperation. In order to never sacrifice this many victims, it's important to strengthen new ways to prevent disasters and the ways to live. For the past 10 years, I was fortunate to have wonderful meetings with so many people. Memories are forgotten, but records remain. As a proof of my experience, I will write a book to tell my story to future generations. From now on, I will cherish the connections with those I have met, cherish my family and myself, and will live my life with the rice fields, which my young family has restored. I pray for your health. I vow to do my best every day toward a speedy recovery and construction, and to tell my story to future generations. Thank you so much for your attention until the end of my talk. I will never want to feel this way myself again. And I will never want anyone to go through this and feel this way. So that we will never sacrifice this many victims, I think it's the mission of those who have lived, and myself who has lived, to tell future generations the truth of our experiences. In Japanese, the word mission is written to use lives. I will tell my story as long as I live. I pray for your health from the land of Minami Sanriku and Kesennuma affected by the earthquake and tsunami. I also pray that the coronavirus pandemic will end as soon as possible. I will conclude my lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Sato-san for that amazing story that touched our hearts and inspired us all to lead better lives. Thank you to our talented interpreter, Haruna Minura, for helping our English-speaking audience understand Sato-san's message. And thank you to Tim Hewitt and David Ball for their assistance in marketing this event. We'd also like to express our gratitude to all of you, the the attendees and those joining us on YouTube for our eagerness to learn, or for your eagerness to learn, excuse me, and to remember what happened 10 years ago in Tohoku. We also hope that you can join some upcoming events, and they'll be on the screen in a moment. Wonderful. As a reminder, the film screening of Voices in the Wind, or Kaze no Denwa, is available through this Sunday, February 28th, or I guess for those in Japan, it would be Monday, February 29th. This film follows a young girl on her journey to Iwate Prefecture in search of answers after the earthquake. The last event in this series will be a panel discussion on attracting economic activity to the Tohoku region, debunking myths about disaster-afflicted areas, and ensuring a prosperous future for Tohoku through community building and grassroots organizations. This program will be on Tuesday, March 16th in the US and March 17th in Japan. All these programs that we mentioned, the Tohoku recovery and the film screening, are available for free. And next, on March 18th in the US and March 19th in Japan, we'll have a program separate from the 311 series on how Japanese pop culture has changed and been influenced by COVID-19. All of these events are free, and please visit www.jasdfw.org for more information and to register. Thank you so much.